For 10 years, you made me raise another man's children as my own. Ah, you are a wicked woman, and may God punish you and make you suffer forever.
My friends, Oya, grab your granuts and chilled water as I tell you the story of a man who was unknowingly raising another man's children as his own until he saw a text message that revealed everything. What he did next will shock you. Oya, let's begin. The evening in the Lagos suburb of Bagada was humid as Kola sat on the edge of the plush sofa watching the television. The sound of multiple messages dropping on his wife's phone that was on the table was distracting him. He didn't want to look at the messages because he was a man of boundaries, a man who believed that love was a sanctuary of trust. But the sound of the notification was so distracting that he picked up the phone to put it on silent. Just then, the screen lit up with a notification that changed the chemistry of his blood. The message was from a contact saved simply as study partner. It was a PDF preview of a laboratory result. Below the file, a string of messages followed. The results are in. Both boys are mine, just like we thought. Kola is still playing the happy father. When are we finishing the relocation plans? I am tired of sharing you with that fool. Kola felt a coldness start at the tips of his fingers. It was a frost that ignored the Nigerian heat. He scrolled further back with his hand shaking. He saw his wife, the woman whose university tuition he had paid, whose boutique he had funded, whose extra study sessions he had encouraged, mocking his simple-mindedness. She and Fredrick, the coursemate she'd introduced years ago, were laughing about how Kola was nothing more than an ATM to them. They discussed about how they would scam him to fund a new life for the four of them, which is Feyi, Fredrick, and the two boys Kola called his sons. In that moment, the bathroom door creaked open. Kola quickly set the phone back exactly as it was. He picked up the remote and flicked to a news channel, his face a mask of bored exhaustion. When Feyi walked out, smelling of vanilla and lavender, she leaned down to kiss his cheek. Usually, he would turn to meet her lips, but this time around he kept his eyes on the screen, letting her lips land on his cold skin. "Did you have a long day, honey?" she asked, her voice dripping with the practiced sweetness of a siren. Kola looked up at her and realized that the woman he loved didn't exist. She was just a character Feyi played to get what she wanted. He felt a scream building in his chest, but he swallowed it, forcing it down his throat until it turned into a hard resolve. "I am just thinking about the future, Feyi," he said, his voice remarkably low, "just thinking about how far we've come and where we're going." She smiled at him with a satisfied smile. Kola smiled back with a thin, sharp expression that didn't reach his eyes. Kola moved through the next few days like a ghost haunting his own life. He watched Feyi smiling as she packed their lunch boxes with the premium snacks Kola bought. Every "I love you, Daddy" from the boys felt like a serrated blade across his throat. He looked for himself in their faces, and it struck him so hard that he couldn't see himself in them. Kola made a decision to run a DNA test secretly because he was finding it hard to believe that the boys were not his. One weekend, as Feyi took the boys to her mother's house for a weekend visit, Kola drove 2 hours to a private lab on the outskirts of Lagos where no one knew him or his family. He carried the toothbrushes of the boys he'd secretly bagged and the hair samples he'd pulled from their hair. The technician looked at Kola and said to him, "Results will be out in 48 hours, sir." Kola nodded as he thanked him and left the lab. Those 48 hours felt like many years to Kola as he waited for the result. When the email finally arrived, Kola was in his home office. He didn't click it immediately. He stared at the glowing blue light of the monitor, knowing that once he opened the file, the man he used to be would die forever. When he saw ready, he clicked the email and read the results stating that the probability of paternity was 0% for both boys. The screen seemed to vibrate right before his eyes. The words instantly blurred into a jagged mess of ink. It dawned on him that not only was his wife deceiving him, he was a benefactor to another man's legacy. He had traded his youth, his sweat, and his peace and money to raise another man's children. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he didn't cry. The tears stayed locked behind a dam of pure, concentrated fury that was slowly crystallizing into a plan. He heard Feyi laughing in the living room, watching a romantic comedy, oblivious to the fact that the floor beneath her feet had just turned into a trapdoor. Few days later, Kola was sitting at the dining table eating dinner. He watched Feyi across the steam of the vegetable soup, as her eyes were darting to her phone every few minutes. He knew she was likely chatting with Fredrick, perhaps mocking the quiet man sitting across from her. Kola took a slow sip of water, cleared his throat, and let a calculated glow of excitement wash over his face. Feyi, I have been sitting on some news. I didn't want to jinx it until the contract was signed. That's why I didn't tell you. She looked up instantly, her interest piqued by the mention of a contract. What is it, Kola? Is it another promotion at the firm? He shook his head with a boyish grin playing on his lips. No, it is even better, he said. A headhunter from a top-tier tech conglomerate in London reached out to me for a senior project lead position. The relocation package is life-changing. It comes with full sponsorship for the whole family and a salary in pounds that makes my current pay look like pocket change. The transformation in Feyi was instantaneous. Her eyes widened. London, she breathed, the words sounding like a prayer. Kola, are you serious? We're finally leaving this place, she said, smiling, already imagining herself in London. Kola leaned in as he looked at her, and then he said, yes, we are leaving, but there's a catch. The company will handle the internal filing, but because of the new UK visa surcharges and the speed they want me there, I have to front the cost for the family's fast-track priority processing, visas, health surcharges, flights, and the initial deposit on the flat. It's a fortune fee, more than I have in liquid cash right now. He watched the gears in her head grind. He knew she had the money she had been siphoning from him for years, plus the assets her father had left her. How much, she asked, her voice sharp with desperation. Kola named a figure that was staggering, a number designed to drain every hidden reservoir she possessed. If we don't arrive London by the end of the month, they'll give the job to a candidate from India. He lied, his face a picture of stressed sincerity. Feyi didn't hesitate. The greed for a life in London with Fredrick, using Kola as the golden bridge to get there, blinded her completely. Don't worry about the money, Kola, she said, already reaching for her phone to call her mother and then, no doubt, her lover. We are leaving this country no matter what it takes. After the Japan news, Feyi moved through the house with a manic energy, her eyes bright with the fever of Japa. She didn't just agree to help, she became the architect of her own financial ruin. Within 48 hours, a for sale sign appeared in the window of her boutique, the very boutique Kola had built for her with his overtime pay. She sold the inventory, the designer lace, the Italian shoes, the handbags at half price, desperate for quick cash. She told her friends she was moving to a higher calling, her voice laced with a condescension. She also sold her jewelry and the plot of land in Lekki her father left her. Kola, the lawyer says the deed transfer would take 3 days, she said, breathless, and the buyer is paying in cash. That should cover majority of the cost, right? Kola looked at her, his expression a masterpiece of feigned stress and gratitude. It will be just enough, Feyi. You have saved us. I don't know what I would do without a partner like you. Few days later, the house started to look empty. Feyi started giving away her clothes to people and her cousins, telling them with a sneer that she wouldn't need these rags in the cold of London. She called her mother, bragging about the elite schools the boys would attend, and even had a falling out with her best friend over a minor disagreement, ending it with, "Enjoy the death of this country. Some of us are destined for better things." In the quiet hours of the night, while Feyi was dreaming of herself wearing winter jackets, Kola sat in his study with a high-end printer and a heavy heart, meticulously crafting the golden tickets. He downloaded templates for UK visas, sponsorship certificates from a fictitious tech conglomerate, and flight itineraries. He handled the paper like a pro, ensuring every watermark looked authentic to an untrained, desperate eye. On their final week in Bagada, Feyi threw a send-forth party for herself. It was not a gathering of friends, but a coronation of Feyi's perceived superiority. She paced the room in a gown that cost more than a year of their house help salary, her chin tilted at an angle that looked down on everyone she had ever known. Kola stood in the corner, a glass of sparkling water in his hand, playing the role of the tired, successful husband. He watched her move like a predator who thought she was the prize. "Oh, Tunji," Feyi said, cornering a former business rival near the buffet, her voice carrying across the room like a whip. "I would have offered you my boutique's old contact list, but I doubt you can handle that level of clientele. Anyway, enjoy the death of Lagos and the power outages." She laughed, a sharp metallic sound that made the guests exchange uncomfortable glances, confident that she would never have to walk these streets again. Fredrick was there, of course, hovering at the edges of the party like a vulture waiting for the carcass to cool. Kola saw them exchange a look, a lingering, filthy look of shared secrets he already knew about. Ever since he told Feyi about his job offer in London, he kept checking her chats with Fredrick, and also discovered that Feyi's plans to divorce him when they get to London so that she can invite Fredrick to London as the father of her children and they will live together as a family. He watched Fredrick wink at his sons, the boys Kola had bathed, fed and loved for years. The sight should have broken him, but it only tempered his resolve into something harder. As the night wound down, Feyi stood up to give a final toast. "To a life without limits," she shouted, raising her glass to a room of people who secretly hoped she would trip and fall down, "to leaving the gutter for the gold." The sun rose over Lagos, not with a glow, but with a glare. At 4 a.m., the house was a hollow rib cage of its former self. Feyi was already up, her face painted with a layer of makeup so thick it looked like ceremonial war paint. She paced the empty living room, her heels clicking against the bare tiles, a sharp, rhythmic sound like a countdown. She clutched the blue folder Kola had given her as if it were the Holy Grail. Inside were the visas and sponsorship letters Kola had spent weeks perfecting. To her, they were tickets to a life with Fredrick. To Kola, they were the receipts of her betrayal. "Kola, move! The Uber is outside," she hissed, her voice jagged with an anxiety she mistook for excitement. She didn't look back at the walls that had sheltered her or the kitchen where she had shared meals with a man she was planning to discard. She only looked forward, toward the tarmac. Kola emerged from the bedroom, dressed in a simple, dark suit. He carried only one suitcase, his own. Feyi, meanwhile, had insisted on bringing 4 massive trunks filled with the few designer items she didn't sell and the boys' best clothes. The boys were groggy and confused. "Are we going to see the Queen, Daddy?" Segun asked, rubbing his eyes. Kola felt a momentary fracture in his heart, a phantom pain for the father he thought he was. He knelt down, adjusting the boy's collar. "You are going on a very long journey, Segun," he said, his voice thick with a truth the child couldn't understand. Feyi pulled the boy away impatiently. "Stop wasting our time, Kola. We have to hurry up and be at the airport on time." The drive to Murtala Muhammed International was a blur of yellow street lights and early morning mist. Feyi spent the entire ride on her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. Kola didn't need to see the messages to know she was coordinating with Fredrick, perhaps planning their future rendezvous at Heathrow. When they arrived at the terminal, the chaos of the Lagos airport engulfed them. The shouting of porters and the desperate energy of travelers filled the air. Feyi marched toward the departure hall like a conqueror. She handed the boys their small backpacks, each containing the fake passports Kola had meticulously created. "Keep these safe," she warned them. "These are your lives now." Kola took a deep breath, the cold air of the terminal's air conditioning hitting his face. "Let's go, Feyi," he said softly. The departure hall of Murtala Muhammed International was a sea of bodies, a frantic symphony of rolling suitcases and desperate goodbyes. Feyi stood in the middle of it like a queen, her head held high, looking down at the porters as if they were dust beneath her expensive heels. She gripped the blue folder so tightly her knuckles were white. When they finally reached the check-in counter, a stern-faced woman in a crisp airline uniform looked up from her monitor. "Passports and visas, please," she said, her voice a monotone drone. Kola stepped forward first. He handed over his genuine passport and a valid, high-level skilled worker visa he had quietly obtained for himself weeks ago, without a single mention of a wife or children. The woman scanned it, the machine gave a soft green chirp, and she nodded. "Everything is in order, Mr. Kola." Feyi practically shoved the boys forward, slapping their passports and the sponsorship certificates onto the counter. "We are on the same relocation package as my husband," she said, her voice loud enough for the travelers behind her to hear. She flashed a triumphant look at a woman nearby who was struggling with a heavy box, her eyes saying, "I am leaving you behind." The airline agent opened the first passport and frowned. Then she swiped it. The machine emitted a low, jarring red buzz that sounded like a death knell in the quiet terminal. The agent's brow furrowed. She picked up the sponsorship certificate Kola had printed in his study and held it up to the light. Then she looked at the visas inside Feyi's passport. She didn't say a word. She simply picked up a telephone and pressed a 3-digit extension. "Supervisor to counter 4, please. We have a document discrepancy." Feyi's smile didn't falter, but her eyes began to twitch. "Discrepancy? There must be a mistake. Check again. My husband was just cleared. We are together." Kola stood 3 feet away, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He watched this sweat begin to break through Feyi's thick foundation. He saw the boys looking up, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Then a supervisor arrived and took one look at the papers. He didn't even use the scanner. "Madam," he said, his voice dropping into a dangerous professional calm, "these documents are not just invalid, they are sophisticated forgeries. These visas do not exist in the UK Home Office database." "Forged? That is impossible." Feyi's voice went from a whisper to a screech, slicing through the hum of the terminal. She grabbed the edge of the marble counter, her knuckles turning white. "Look at my husband. He was just cleared. We are on the same application." The supervisor didn't flinch. He simply signaled to 2 uniformed security officers standing near the metal detectors. They began to move toward counter 4 with a slow, practiced gait that suggested they had seen this many times before. Feyi spun around, her eyes wild, searching for Kola. He was standing exactly where she had left him, but the man she saw was now a stranger. Gone was the simple-minded provider, the ATM she and Fredrick had laughed about in their midnight chats. In his place stood a man with eyes as cold and deep as the Atlantic. He didn't move to help her. He didn't speak to the guards. He simply checked his watch, a silver piece she had pressured him to buy so he would look the part of a successful Londoner. "Kola, what is going on?" she wailed as the first security officer placed a hand on her elbow. "It is not the same visa we all have. You are the one that handled everything, so why are they rejecting our visas? What is going on?" The supervisor looked at Kola, waiting for a defense, a plea, or an explanation. But instead, Kola took a slow, deliberate step forward. He didn't look at the officers. He looked directly into Feyi's eyes, peeling back the layers of her deception with a single sharp gaze. The terminal seemed to go silent around them. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The tech job, the visa processing, the sale of her boutique and her father's land, it hadn't been a bridge to London. It had been a funeral pyre for her life in Nigeria, and she had been the one to light the match. She looked at the fake visas, then back at Kola, her mouth falling open in a silent, horrific scream of understanding. The man she thought she was duping had just sold her the rope she was currently using to hang herself. "Kola, what have you done?" Feyi screamed as she tried to reach for him, her fingers clawing at the air, but the security guard's grip tightened on her arm. The boys were wailing now, but Kola didn't flinch. He simply reached into his inner breast pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. He held it up so she could see the logo of the private DNA lab and the paternity test result. "Kola did a little extra study of my own, Feyi," he said, his voice a calm blade. He watched the blood drain from her face, leaving her skin sickly grey under the airport lights. "I know about the boys. I know they are not mine. I also know about your relocation plans and how you plan to divorce me later when you have gotten your residency so that you can bring in the father of your children." Feyi's knees buckled. She sank toward the cold floor, the heavy folder spilling its useless forged contents across the tiles. "Kola, please," she whimpered, her arrogance replaced by a desperate terror. She looked around at the crowd of travelers who were now staring, some filming with their phones. Kola leaned down, his face inches near hers, his breath smelling of the morning coffee she had served him with a kiss. "What do you mean by please, Feyi? Why are you begging me? Oh, you are saying please because I beat you to your game. If you had succeeded with your plans, would you have said please? Feyi, you are very wicked. What did I do to deserve this? You did not just cheat on me. You gave me another man's children to raise as my own. Ha, Feyi, you are wicked. Anyways, all thanks to you selling all your properties, I have been compensated for all the money I spent on you, your lover coursemate, and your children. And with that, he stood up, smoothing his suit jacket with a chillingly casual grace. The supervisor was already calling for the airport police to escort Feyi to the station. Where are you going? She shrieked as he turned his back. Kola, you can't leave us here. He stopped and looked back over his shoulder, with a small, sad smile touching his lips. It was not for her, but for the man he used to be. I'm going to London, Feyi. My visa is real and my job is real. Then he paused, his eyes flicking to the boys for the last time. If you need help, you can call your lover coursemate Fredrick. I hear he's excellent at assisting with studies. Maybe he can study how to bail you out of a forgery case. And with that, he walked through the glass partitions of the immigration line, his steps steady and his shoulders square. Behind him, the sounds of the terminal dissolved into a chaotic noise of Feyi's screams and the rhythmic thud of security boots on the floor. He heard her call his name one last time, with a high, thin sound that was swallowed by the roar of an overhead announcement. He handed his boarding pass to the gate agent, walked down the jet bridge, and stepped into the pressurized silence of the aircraft. As he buckled his seatbelt, he felt the weight of 10 years of deception lift off his chest, replaced by the cool, thin air of a new horizon. Thanks for watching this video, and do not forget to subscribe, like, and share this video.